All right, so here with me today is Nate Simpson, who was the creative director at Kerbal Space Program 2 over at Intercept Games while it was still in development under Take-Two and Private Division. We're here to talk a little bit today about his experiences working on that game and also maybe his thoughts on the spiritual successor, Kitten Space Agency. He's also currently developing an indie game called Mailstrom, which I'd love to talk a little bit more about here in a minute. But you also did find some success authoring a comic series called Nonplayer, which I
Oh,
have
wow.
read, and I did really enjoy it. So looking forward to potentially some more issues of that. I think you have a really interesting perspective, having been the creative director for a major game that had the benefit of starting from a place where the franchise was already well known and beloved, and then also now developing an indie game with a much smaller budget and obviously a brand that you have to sort of build from the ground up in terms of name recognition. But then I think you've also gotten a glimpse into the job market for developers that has changed dramatically over the last 5 to 10 years. So to start off, I'm just really interested to know what your experiences have been going from one of those things into the other, and what the challenges were being a major game developer, and then juxtaposed to an indie developer.
That is a huge question. And
Yeah,
hi,
it's a
nice
lot.
to be here. Um, what has the change been like? Well, I mean, so for one thing, I don't know too many people, even the ones who still have jobs in games. I'll speak specifically about people who worked on KSP2, for example. Um, Everything's remote, it seems like.
Yeah,
So I think the biggest change for me, just from a day-to-day level, the thing that comes up the most with my therapist is just isolation. It almost feels like people in games have kind of gone back to the COVID era and that we're all working in our home offices on projects that are not really co-located with us. In
okay.
fact, I think I only know one person now who like actually goes to an office and is around other developers. And which is kind of a shame because I think like the thing or one of the things I like the most about working in games is just the vibe, being around other creative people all day. Um, but I know a lot of the people who I used to work with are actually much happier getting to, stay in their own space and live their own life. So there's good, there's bad. You notice I prefaced it by saying those who have a job, it's grim out there.
Yeah,
Um, we could probably spend a whole hour talking about why it's grim or how it's grim. But the key takeaway is that there just are not very many jobs out there, especially for American developers.
yeah,
We're expensive, and I think a lot of publishers and studios are probably leaning more in the co-dev or offshoring direction, and because there's so many talented people around the world who don't cost what a person in Seattle costs. So yeah, it's different. It's definitely
yeah,
different. It's a quieter life. Um, I think it's probably a more balanced life. I think I sleep better.
yeah.
Um, but I don't I used to ride my bike into work every day and I don't have that daily commute anymore. So trying to figure out how to like, you know, get my reps in is kind of a challenge.
Yeah, especially with early access now, where fans are getting a much earlier glimpse at games. I think that there's a lot of pressure to get games out there making money before they're finished. And you sort of have to work under the spotlight of expectations of both, especially when you were working on Kerbal Space Program 2, the corporate oversights, but then also the expectations of fans. And it also got me thinking a lot about how, for a lot of people, their jobs aren't really under the microscope in the same way that game developers are. And I don't think maybe that's something that a lot of game developers think about when they take on positions. I don't think they go into it with the expectation of everybody's going to be watching what I'm doing. Whereas, if you're an actor and you're going to be on TV or you decide to, get on YouTube, you're expecting people to see you and respond to you. But yeah, so I feel like it's just kind of a double-edged sword because you want people to play the game and have influence over the direction that the development takes, which is a positive thing. But then you also have situations where features are maybe only half baked and you get hit with bad reviews or criticisms about what is or isn't working. So yeah, my next question is just how did you deal with being the face of that development team that got hit with some of those road bumps?
Uh, Good question. I might preface my answer by saying that I've been making games since 1993, and the vast majority of the work I've done has been on games that either released to little fanfare or games that were not completed. because most games don't get completed. That's just kind of a statistical reality of the industry.
Right.
So, an average game dev spends, between 1 to 3 years per job until whatever project they're on either runs out of funding or releases and then runs out of funding for the next project, where you're just it's a kind of migrant work. So but you kind of develop relationships with a group of people who you might cross paths with more and more frequently, but there's a lot of moving around. Um, and to me, the one of many things that were different about KSP2 was its high visibility. And I found that sense that people cared
Yeah.
extremely energizing. Um, I mean, I had kind of resigned myself to, being a sort of journeyman game dev and kind of trying to be happy if a few of the things I worked on came out.
Yeah.
Um, but my face or my name wasn't really attached to even the things that did come out, so the stakes weren't particularly high from the perspective of personal advancement or my career.
Right.
Um, Obviously, with KSP2, stakes are significantly higher, primarily because, and I think this is more true for me than for other people on the team, um, I was a significant part not only of the team leadership, but also of the marketing apparatus. And especially like when I say marketing, I mean it in the broadest possible sense, not just in terms of trying to convey the enthusiasm I felt about the project to people in the wider world, but also communicating that enthusiasm to people on the team for like staff retention, or communicating it to people at the publisher or people within the label, or, like especially for something as niche as, modular spaceships.
Right.
Um, it's you kind of spend a lot of your time just getting people to care, because you can just always assume, especially before we had announced that we were working on the game, we had to do these very, very targeted to staff up. We had to kind of basically just raid our own Rolodexes and then bring in whoever we knew. But we could never put out like an open call for like an open role because that would have given away that we were working on the game. So
Right.
in trying to but I had that experience dozens of times of having somebody come in, and more often than not, they had never heard of Kerbal Space Program.
Oh, interesting.
So really like tr put I think that was kind of my primary function over the course of the entire project, was just to be kind of like almost like I don't know, a defibrillator, like shock people into a state of enthusiasm
Yeah.
when like because I think, and I still think, the original KSP is the greatest game ever made. And it's very easy for me to speak authentically about that because I put thousands of hours into it, and I think it's a thing of beauty that almost like transcends games entirely. Like it's almost an artistic medium, and it's a science experience. And I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here. I know
Yeah.
you agree,
I totally
but
agree. Yeah.
yeah. So a big part of my job was helping to remind everybody how special it was that we got to work on this thing. And so, like, um, yeah, did it have other effects on my life or other consequences? Um, I had a fear of public speaking at the beginning of this thing. Like, I am not known to be a person who's comfortable speaking in front of cameras. Um, and I think that was probably like the life skill that I developed the most over, I don't know how long was it, 7 years. Um, and so, like it's cool that I got to develop that muscle. It is not necessarily the part of the job that I loved the most, although
Mm.
I really loved meeting people. That was the one part of it I hadn't expected to be as gratifying as it was the few times that we got to go to either Space Creator Day or uh, whatever conventions of various kinds, getting to meet like the people whose lives were being enriched by the game and who kind of shared the way I felt about it,
Yeah.
especially kids, especially like so many like dads and their kids sort of bonding over, actually moms and dads,
Yeah.
like just that game having been something that they and their kid could share with one another and be enthusiastic about. And yeah, that was pretty cool. I mean, no other game I'd ever gotten to work on was good for the world in the way that KSP was.
Yeah,
But yes, did it sting to then have the label closed down and to have my name be associated with, a project that some people regard to be not to have delivered on its original promise. I mean, I certainly believe it didn't deliver on its original promise because we made some very specific promises that we were not able to deliver on.
sure.
Um, yeah, I mean that feels terrible. It still feels bad. And yeah, it like the entire thing feels a little bit radioactive still.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the games kind of being a medium of art. I know it sounds really cheesy for me to say, but I've always felt that games, even when I was a little kid, I felt like they were kind of a medium of interactive art that we all kind of got to share in. And it makes me think a lot about like my first game experience playing games like Earthbound and Final Fantasy and games like that that really were a little bit more story driven. Uh, and even to this day, I go back and play them, and it gives me that real sense of nostalgia. And I completely agree with you. I think it's something really special.
Yeah.
Uh, but I'm sure it was difficult to kind of, like you said, act like the defibrillator because we had the trailer come out and then, years passed and you're still, waiting for updates and hoping for another trailer and hoping for an announcement any day now. And, after a while, people move on and you have to kind of re-engage the audience over and over and over again. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um,
Yeah. It felt like a long time to me too. I mean, during those times when it was quiet on the outside, those were generally the times when we were working the hardest because I
oh,
think the
I'm
whole team
sure.
was keenly aware that like there was a clock ticking somewhere in the universe. I think it caught many of us off guard that it was the closure of the label.
Yeah,
Uh, and I am I think I tend to take on blame for things myself. So, it's hard for me not to ask myself what I could have done differently to have
mhm,
altered the outcome. Like if uh and I have to cut myself some slack because I didn't have complete control over really the timing of anything.
right.
Um but because my job was to be that defibrillator, I sometimes wonder if there could have been something I could have done internally, for example, like to just radically alter the situation so that, there was more time or more money. Um, frequently I have people sort of, or especially within the team, it's a common exercise we do together of like, if you had a time machine,
Right.
you could go back to the beginning and do everything differently, knowing what you know now, like what would you do differently? Um, and there are a couple of like immovable components of that 7 years. One of them's COVID dropping right in the middle of the 7 years,
Right. Yeah.
which made staffing brutal. Um, but like I think when I really dig deep, I think it had to do with we always had kind of an uphill struggle around staffing. And I think it really began with just uh developing the game at first, in an unannounced state. So having to kind of do stealth hiring. Um, yeah, so yeah, maybe I'd have been out on a street corner somewhere. I guess I'd have been fired if I did that. Yeah, so I still don't. This is my
Yeah.
Kobayashi Maru. Like I think about it a lot. I mean, we had amazing developers, but once a project goes that long,
Yeah.
it's hard to get anyone to stay put for that amount of time anyway. So you're
It
you're
is.
dealing with a certain amount of. I think our turnover was actually a little bit better than most game teams. I think a lot of people were very passionate about it, but still, 7 years is a lot of time to ask of a game dev. And so we had these like kind of multiple generations, especially of our engineering team, and like just having a continuity of stewardship was challenging, especially for something that complex. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't, everyone did their best. Everyone did
Yeah.
their best, and it's, yeah, I don't, I don't know. What's your sense of it from the outside? I actually kind of try to stay away from. the discourse these days, because in general, when I come into contact with this conversation online,
it
it's
can get
not all that
toxic. Yeah.
happy for me. Although I do come across, I've met, I think, three people in the wild just at like coffee shops who recognize me.
Oh, really?
Um,
What's
and
that like?
they've been really sweet.
Yeah.
They've been really, I think in general, they've understood that, you know, that I did my best.
Yeah. Yeah, and like you said, I mean, it's being, the one of the people who is more out in front talking about it in interviews and at conventions, like you said. I think, when people are disappointed in the way a project goes, regardless of whose fault it is, people are frustrated, and especially online, it's very easy for people to forget that there's a human being that worked really hard at trying to do something, and they just vent their frustrations out, and I'm sure that that is something, like you said, that can be really difficult. But when you're face to face with somebody, it's a different,
That's true.
it
Uh,
humanizes people.
if
Yeah.
someone hates me and I run across them in the wild, maybe they're just kind of making the choice to just not
Oh, no,
talk
no,
to me
that's
at
not
all.
that's not what I mean. That's not what I mean.
No,
I just
but
want
I
to,
think that's
yeah.
probably true. I don't know. You know, this whole experience has definitely given me a little bit better understanding of what's funny is what keeps popping into my head is like the whole prequel discourse with George Lucas
Mm,
and how opinionated we all were when those movies came out, and how certain I was that if I had had the keys to that kingdom, I'd have made way better decisions.
yeah.
Like, come on, man. Like we could have done way better than that. And I can see it in a lot of the way that people respond to the way that KSP2 unfolded. I know that there are people, very smart people, who are certain they would have done it differently or done it better, or, if you had just done X, Y, and Z differently, everything would have been fine. You blew it, you know? Um,
And regardless
I,
of, and if there's truth in that, but hindsight is always 2020. And
I mean, there were people with that perspective even during the project. Like, I mean, there were, there were a lot of people we came into contact with on the forums. Interestingly, with a game like KSP, you have a lot of smart fans.
yes.
And I know there was one perspective that was just like, just make it more realistic. There were many people who were just apoplectic about the sort of concessions we had to make to gameplay. People who had the amount of crap that I got about, metastable metallic hydrogen as a fuel source. It's just
Yeah.
like, um, I get it. I'm sorry, but it is a video
It
game
is
at
a
the end
video
of the
game.
day.
Yeah. It is meant to be fun at the end of the day. Yeah.
Man, but it sure would have been nice if we could have. We were so close on colonies. Oh, we could taste it. Oh, and it was yeah, that well, I don't know. I mean, it sounds like Kitten Space Agency might be inheriting the crown. I know a little bit about it.
Yeah.
Not much. At least one person from Intercept is on that team now,
There's
Jamie,
a
I think.
there's a
Is there more
few.
than one? Okay.
I know Blackrock's there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and there's a couple others. I'm not 100% sure exactly off the top of my head. I'd have to double check. But yeah, I think there is a couple. Um, yeah, so you mentioned colonies, that got me wondering if there was a specific feature that, having hindsight now, that you felt maybe slowed down development or bogged you down, or a feature
Oh,
that in hindsight you would maybe cut out.
um, a feature that I would cut out. I don't know if I would think of it necessarily in terms of like a feature, because there are sort of different skill sets associated with different features. So it's not like if we didn't make one feature, then we could
Sure.
necessarily put that person com in a completely modular way onto some
Yeah.
other part of the game. Um,
Well, I'll tell
and
you what my thought was on this, and
sure,
maybe
go ahead.
maybe you tell me what you think about it. I always wondered, and for me personally, and I know that there's going to be 1,000 people in the comments who yell at me for having this opinion, but I always felt like, for me, Kerbal Space Program wasn't a multiplayer game, and I know that Kitten Space Agency is also aiming to be a multiplayer game, and that's a feature that people really, really wanted. But just for me personally, it's not a feature I would have used, and so I was specifically wondering how much you felt trying to put multiplayer into the game, because it's a complicated thing to do with time warps and
That's
all the
that's certainly
physics, and
true.
yeah.
Um, so maybe I'll speak to like what the fantasy that got me out of bed in the morning was because it did involve multiplayer, but kind of peripherally. Um, I mean, the thing that I was most excited to do was to use the colony system to sort of pick these spots of interest on various planets, build a colony, play dollhouse with a colony, use that colony to create new vehicles, specifically like resource collection rovers, set those rovers on automatic delivery routes because the whole plan was that it would, if you ran a route and collected the resource and came back, you could then automate that and repeat it.
Which I love that idea for that
And
feature.
then set up other ones that are carrying the stuff from, the ground base to an orbital base, and then essentially building out all of the nodes in an interplanetary and then eventually interstellar trade network. Um, and just the fact that I would have such minute control over every element of that trade network, all the way down to how the rover was designed. And the thought of doing that, my multiplayer fantasy was far less about like racing people or crashing into people or, sort of like the sort of physics intensive stuff,
Yeah,
which would have been fun, but I think it would have been fun for a short time. It probably would have generated a lot of viral content and probably would have had some marketing value from that perspective.
sure.
But but for me, the thing I was most excited about was large asynchronous multiplayer games where, where I might be involved in a space race trying to achieve certain meta goals faster than a competing group.
Oh, interesting.
We even had this sort of notion of agencies as being the central organizing uh, component of that experience, where you could have multiple players on one agency and multiple players on another agency, kind of all working together, where like we could even divide the work so that like I'm just going to design all of the ground vehicles, okay, guys, and or sort of divide it up however you want to divide it,
Yeah.
almost working like subcontractors within the same space agency, and then just organically discovering the colonies of the people who are competing with you, right? Landing, especially with the sort of this notion of those discoverable alien artifacts that were sort of out in the world of KSP2, kind of being a locus of, they were going to be giving off a signal that you would go and follow the signal, and then competing groups might also be going to those places, so that you would very organically begin to encounter either in the map view or in the sort of real flight view, um, other people's creations.
Oh, that's actually, maybe I hadn't really fleshed it out in my own mind. That sounds amazing.
And then it wouldn't necessarily have been competitive, even, although I think there were some people who are really into the space race idea of it. The thing I was most excited about was um, like being an ally of somebody else and making, putting a bunch of effort into extracting a very high value, but also low accessibility resource that's in a place. Uh, sorry, just minor digression. I don't know
Yeah.
if did we ever talk about, I don't know if I've ever publicly talked about any of the interstellar planets we were working on, but one of them
I'm
was
not.
called, Lapat. And Lapat had an incredibly thick atmosphere. And then it had um, one extremely high mesa. And then it had, I think we were going to put lithium deposits in the very lowlands of Lapat. And so it kind of presented an interesting set of navigational obstacles, because you'd want to set up your sort of like depot going to whatever your orbital depot was going to be up on that plateau, so that you had less of this very soupy atmosphere above you. But then you would have to then run a resource collection mission down the side of the mesa and down into the lowlands to collect the lithium and then bring it back up. And you just have to make an interesting kind of vehicle to make that happen. The
Yeah.
way the atmosphere was set up, flying vehicles would just not be a good solution for that resource extraction challenge. And so, like, just the idea of the planet being unique in that way, so it presents new kinds of flight or, navigational challenges. If I'm playing in that big asynchronous multiplayer context, then like I could be the guy who's like, look, I'm gonna handle the pot. Let me just focus on that. You guys, go to whichever other celestial bodies you want to do, and then we'll have one base that we all share where we're just gonna all ferry our stuff to that base. And then the idea being that there would be certain components that you could only build if you had access to the complete panoply of resources. So as a means of kind of unlocking for all of us some newer high technology engine, it just would have been so cool to each of us,
Yeah.
to feel like I was contributing to that larger uh, advancement of my little civilization that I'm sharing with my friends. And the fact that like, all of those orbital facilities would continue to persist in the save game, even when other people weren't necessarily playing in real time. So it's a kind of take a penny, leave a penny situation where I could have been bringing stuff to that colony when my friends are asleep or, whenever I have the time to do it. And then when they log back in, they'd say, oh, look at that. Nate brought in a bunch of lithium and now we can make some new
Yeah.
engine.
That that sounds amazing.
I want somebody's got to do it. Like I hope Kitten Space Agency are the guys, or I don't know. I don't know the disposition of the KSP IP. You may know more about that than I do. Is there any notion of who owns it and is anybody doing anything with it?
So right now it's under development by Dean Hall, who worked on Daisy, and he also developed Icarus and Stationeers, if you're familiar with those games. It's
Are you talking about Kerbal or are you talking about Kitten Space Program or Kitten Space Agency?
Kitten Space Agency.
Okay. Yeah, I knew about that. I was
Oh,
asking
sorry.
also, like, do you know the disposition of the KSP
Oh,
IP? Is that
only
Did who?
rumors.
Oh, okay.
So as far as I know right now, Private Division bundled together a bunch of games and they were sold to a private equity group called Haveli Investments. And Haveli Investments bought, um, I forget the name. One was a Lord of the Rings game, and then there was another game that was very nearly finished that was in that bundle. And we have heard rumors that some of those games are resuming development, whether or not that's Kerbal Space Program 2, don't know. There was rumors that a group of developers that used to be employed at Annapurna uh, were potentially going to take on Kerbal Space Program, but again, I don't know if those were taking on Kerbal Space Program or finishing up development on these other titles. Yeah, so
I mean, would it? I don't know. I don't know how poisonous my name is, but hey, if Annapurna or those other guys
yeah,
want to give me a call,
yeah, reach out. Yeah,
come on, you guys, you need a defibrillator. You
right,
got to
right,
have a cheerleader, right?
exactly. Yeah, so call Nate, get him on board. Yeah. Um, but yeah, so some of the other people that are working on Kin Space Agency is actually Harvester, who I'm sure you know.
What?
Yeah, he works with Rocket Works now. I'm not exactly sure what his title or role
Oh,
is,
wow.
but I do know that he is working there with them and has been involved with Kitten Space Agency. And
That's incredible. That's very
yeah,
exciting.
very exciting. And one of the things that was mentioned once in an interview, nobody had reached out to him in terms of collaborating with Kerbal Space Program too. And it was also said that there was a sort of firewall between the development of Kerbal Space Program 2 and those who were working on the DLC content for the original Kerbal Space Program. So I guess my question is, is that true, and what was the reason or the thinking behind having that firewall in place?
Um, that's a good question. So I don't remember there being, was there a firewall? I mean, obviously, when we were unannounced to the team at Squad as well.
Okay.
Um, and then there was a period during which Squad continued to work on DLCs, and I wonder if they gave them more runway as our project continued to, experience delays. I wonder if there was a sense that like the original game could kind of keep the fire burning around just the whole Kerbal thing. Um, I remember when they flew them in for the first time. I don't remember the timing of that. But I do remember them consulting with us fairly early. I remember there being a pretty heavy like info dump just in terms of like what are I especially remember like David Dragoning, Jamie Layton. a lot of these kind of old hands that that definitely came in with a lot of warnings, a lot of like kind of like here's where the pitfalls live, here's what you need to be looking out for. That probably would have been very handy to have in hand earlier.
Sure. And to be
Um,
fair, I don't think Harvester was still on the team at Squad at the time.
yeah, so Harvest, I don't know the details of Harvester's story, but my understanding is that he had left Squad significantly before before KSP2 was a glimmer in anybody's eye. And if we're talking about like justice existing in the universe, I would love at some point for Harvester and the KSP IP to somehow be reunited. Although this information you're sharing with me about Kitten Space Agency makes me wonder, maybe in some way we could get Harvester back.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like I wasn't privy to a lot of the stuff that kind of took place on the strategic level around, what the label was prioritizing or what their meta strategy was. Um, maybe that firewall in terms of intel around the strategic thinking was to my benefit. I think they probably just wanted me focusing on making a game. Um, I do know that once the former members of Squad who stayed with us were working on KSP2, there was a massive injection of new energy and new expertise, and they were like, great. I loved working with them. That was sort of like a dream come true, right? Like these are the people who made this game that I loved.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I mean, with respect to Harvester in particular, like yeah, it would be a dream come true to get to work with him, but I'll also take, getting to play another space game that he made. That sounds cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I have you played his most recent game, Kit Hack, by chance? Which is a
No, I
similar.
haven't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've watched I mean, again, he was sort of actively promoting that game in sort of the last year of KSP2, and
Right.
I remember Matt Lown asking him some questions about what he thought about KSP2, and he was very charitable. I think he was very generous in the way that he talked about what we were trying to do. Um, and I appreciated that. I did reach out to him just to say thank you. Um, Fairly recently. I don't know, in the past several months, and he very graciously, said hi, and so
Yeah.
yeah. But I think he's great. I've always sort of admired him from afar. Yeah, it's good news that he's still doing cool stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I've never actually spoken to him directly, but I've seen him speak in a couple different town halls over Kitten Space Agency, and he seems like a pretty nice guy. So
Yeah,
yeah. Um,
and a genius,
and a
like
genius.
a
Yes.
certifiable genius. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The work he did on Kerbal Space Program, and like you said, I mean, I honestly don't know how many hours I have poured into it. I'd have to look. But yeah, I've played that game for years now.
I mean,
Uh,
one thing that blows my mind about the achievement of the original Kerbal Space Program, if there's one like technical lesson I learned over the course of KSP2, it's like you've heard like measure twice, cut once.
yeah.
With something of this complexity, it's like measure 10 times and cut once. And considering the amount of pre-planning and sort of like architectural thought that had to go into setting that thing up, the reality of watching Harvester develop the original Kerbal Space Program from zero in a completely evolutionary, completely organic way is just incredible. That something with that many beautiful moving parts
Yeah.
was created iteratively. It grew like a cell,
Yeah.
and the fact that the community was able to kind of, we could all sort of participate in its growth together. I remember, he would do these periodic updates, and oh, there's a new planet, and then you just,
Yeah.
everyone would kind of dive in together, and yeah, I think that in some ways inspired the degree to which on KSP2 we were trying to, share what we were doing with the community.
Yeah.
But obviously, much bigger team, uh, you know, big companies involved. It's a slightly different. I don't think
Yeah.
there's any way to perfectly capture that magic. But I
Yeah.
loved being a part of it.
And and that I think was one of the first games that I really followed along with, and in terms of like early access and the community really having the ability to have a say. Because that was it kind of came out around the time that, at least for me, that I started to notice these early access games and these indie
Minecraft,
game.
right?
Minecraft,
Minecraft was
yeah.
the other big one that year. Yeah.
Yep.
And
Yep.
same thing, right? Like I just remember thinking like, well, this is a crazy original game where everyone's made out of blocks and there's this guy Notch and
Yeah.
he just keeps adding stuff. Yeah. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was
and
great.
this game, and he created something that just caught fire and changed gaming, really.
Yeah.
And especially Minecraft, you know, and to some degree Roblox now. We've got these games that give people the ability to create games within the games. Uh, and then those games
Yeah.
kind of become wildly successful. And soon I've heard, and again, this is a rumor, I don't think this has been confirmed by Take-Two, that Grand Theft Auto 6 is potentially going to have some type of game creator built into it so that,
Oh, that's interesting.
which would be huge and tons of fun. So I mean, there's a part of me that really hopes that is true. But and I think you mentioned in one of your other videos that this kind of creates an environment where kids who are growing up on these games almost have the expectation of games being free and kind of being able to move from one game to the other very, very quickly and having this this excess of games and this kind of saturation of access where everything exists and kind of gets lost in the shuffle. If you care to talk a little bit about what it's been like as an indie developer now,
Oh boy.
trying to navigate that environment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I have a 12-year-old son and he plays a lot of Roblox. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
And so that means I play a lot of Roblox with him.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and it's so interesting the amount of, I mean, number one, how democratic the platform is, right? That you have a very large amount of user-generated game content that is, in some ways, almost like a shotgun approach of just exploring every conceivable game idea, not to a very great depth, but
Yeah.
it's essentially like just a million prototypes. And then the ones that get traction are not necessarily the best ones, but there's this sort of meme games that just sort of like pop up and everybody plays it for a week and then they go away and
Yeah.
good on you for winning the lottery. And then there are like, I mean, you hear within the games industry an increasing number of people who are kind of just like, I'm working on a Roblox game, like that there might be a little bit of movement somewhere at the higher end where like a slightly more polished experience made by professionals might have a chance of getting a little more visibility. I don't, my sense of it is that the profit sharing isn't amazing. And of course,
Yeah.
to the winner goes the spoils. And, so if you don't have a winner, if your thing isn't immediately marketable to children, then, oh, well, I mean,
Yeah.
what's new? That's kind of been true of all games. But the indie game dev journey I've been on for the last, what's more like a year and a half, I guess, since Intercept, um, has been one of being sort of repeatedly reminded that everything is different.
Yeah.
And what I think I entered that journey feeling like I remember small teams, cool idea. We're gonna get gonna get together with a friend and we're just gonna bang this thing together. The tools have never been better. I'm gonna learn Unreal 5.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go back to basics and just build a game and that I will be rewarded for my hard work and ingenuity. And then sort of toward the end of that first year, I began to really understand in a much more intimate way than I had when I was working on KSP2, the way that the sort of Steam algorithm works, the way that like independent PC game marketing works. And the first thing that should have given me pause was the fact that the people who seemed to be getting the most traction on social media were the people who were selling shovels to the indie dev gold rush. It's the guy with the golden microphone teaching you how to like, maximize your wish list or whatever.
Interesting.
And everyone was, telling us, you gotta do Next Fest. there's just this long list of things you got to do in exactly the right order in order to maximize those numbers. Because
Yeah.
if you launch without a large number of wish lists, you're doomed. And you end up sort of playing an analytics game, which is not, by the way, why I wanted to get into games to begin with, right? I had this very Pollyanna-ish notion that I was just, if we make something fun that we believe in, somebody will pick it up. Doesn't have to be a huge hit, but this at least we're doing something for ourselves, not having to listen to big bosses who are 3 levels above us, and it's just us against the world.
Yeah.
Me and my buddy Dan.
Yeah. If you build it, they
And
will come kind of thing. Yeah.
exactly. And then we did Next Fest, and there were over 3,000 games in Next Fest. And
So how do you stand out? Yeah.
and I mean, and just looking at our YouTube numbers, like if I'm not working on something that has the word Kerbal attached to it, ain't nobody. I mean, there's a few nice people who will watch our content, but like view counts in the hundreds. And and it's a very busy world with a lot of really high quality content in it. And
Yeah.
you can be in the upper 5 to 10% of quality and you're totally invisible. And okay, I mean you hear the word disillusionment, it should actually have a positive connotation. It means the removal of an illusion.
Yeah.
But that was definitely an illusion that I had removed from my eyes around the marketing of indie stuff. In fact, our game, the biggest thing that come out of, we released a demo for this game, Mailstrom, which is about being a letter carrier for the Pan-Galactic Postal Service during a Lovecraftian apocalypse.
Which is
Um,
really fun, by the way. And if anybody wants to go check it out, it's on Steam. You should definitely
but
go download it and check it out.
that's very nice of you to say. And I think it's fun too, but it's in demo state. It
Yeah.
is what two people and a third person helped us out with tech art, but what we could achieve in a year
Right.
without having an income. And actually, we have been contacted by the owners of another product that has a very similar name,
Oh, really?
and that product is not a video game. However, a certain LLM, which will not be named, has trouble telling the two products apart. So if you Google
Hmm.
Maelstrom, you get a description of two separate products, one of which is a game and one of which is not, blended into one another and
Okay.
creating some mutated third thing. And so we have been very gently encouraged uh, to change the name of our product. And actually, I think today is the name when we're having to like press the button on Steam and swap all the name stuff over. So you'll be hearing it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Maelstrom is now called Pan-Galactic Postal Service, which in a way might actually be better because at least it kind of tells you exactly what the game's about. It's about being a member of the Pan-Galactic Postal Service. So, yeah, if you come across or if you're searching for Maelstrom stuff and you can't find it, it's because you're looking for the wrong thing now.
And I will put a link to that in the description of this
Oh, I
video.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, and real quick, just about AI and how that has affected the industry. Is that something that you came up against in your development of Kerbal Space Program 2 or your indie game?
I mean, I'm pretty impressed by the sensitivity of most gamers to AI generated content. Like at least in its current form, AI is, it's not quite at parity with something that's made creatively by human minds. The way it's impacted my life, other than making it harder for me to get a job, is learning new things. ChatGPT is absolutely turbocharging my ability to learn new job skills just because I can target my area of learning to whatever problem I'm trying to solve in the moment. So you never spend time learning irrelevant information. You only learn the information you need to get the thing you're currently doing done. And I I've never been this effective as a developer.
Interesting. So
So
you
from
see
that
it as like,
perspective, as a teacher, as a means of getting highly targeted information into my brain, amazing. But personally, I will never, till the day I die, use AI to generate content. If only because I feel like, honestly, I don't even like probably when we first started using the word content is when the jig was up,
Yeah.
because I don't like thinking of this as this modular gray sludge that we just produce in order to get compensation. But yeah, like I want to make art, and I think art by definition comes from humans.
Yeah.
And there whatever the stuff that's made by AI, we need another word for that, even if it looks like visual art, it's not art. It's product.
A lot of people love to call it slop.
Yeah, a slop's a
Yeah.
great word for it, I guess. But
Yeah.
yeah, I won't, no matter how good those tools get, it's great that what it does do is lower barrier for entry for people who may not have necessarily art skills. And you can definitely get some good enough stuff from AI now that you can sort of like put together something polished. Um, so, for like the single game dev working someplace in, I don't know, Greenland.
Who just needs a
Like,
sprite or something? Yeah.
I need a sprite. There's a way to get a sprite. Fantastic. Although I would stress that there's a lot of unemployed game devs out there who would be happy to make your sprite for you for probably surprisingly competitive wages.
Yeah.
So, here's a shout out for good old-fashioned human ingenuity.
Yeah.
But yeah, not a huge fan of what it produces, huge fan of what it enables.
Yeah. And I think I agree. I think we're still all kind of learning
Yeah.
where AI fits into various industries. And oh, one thing, and this, I was watching Black Mirror in your comic, Nonplayer. You have the device which people are using to get in and out of the game is kind of like a small round device that sits on the temple and kind of goes over the ear. In the episode, in several episodes of Black Mirror, there are devices that look exactly like that, that they use to get in and out of games, and one that they get in and out of just different virtual worlds. In the USS Callister, I think is the episode.
Oh, I love that episode.
It's great, and so was the sequel. But
I
the
haven't seen the sequel actually.
oh, there's a second
Good.
one. Yeah, it's
Okay.
very good. It's very good. Uh, but yeah, the device. As soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, that I've seen that before.
They'll be hearing from my lawyers.
Right.
No, I mean, like my whole career has really, I'm beginning to understand one thing about myself, which is that I'm constantly trying to take very heavy aircraft off on a very short runway. And I have trouble modulating my like sort of scale aspirations because the things that excite me the most are they tend to be ambitious in the scale dimension. And non-player is like I like fantasy stuff and I liked sci-fi and I thought of a way of writing a story that was about fantasy and sci-fi
Yeah,
and sort
putting
of
them
like
together.
embedding one inside of the other. And it came like the first issue took me a year to draw. I took an entire year off to draw the first issue, and it was published through Image Comics, and it did reasonably well for an independent comic.
Yeah.
And then it got optioned a couple of times, and of course
Well, that's
that
amazing.
that
Yeah.
that rarely goes anywhere. And then but I had 9 issues written and I'd released one. It took a year to make, and I, didn't pay for itself. And then had a kid and drew the second issue of Non-Player entirely between like the hours of 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. over
Yeah.
3 years. And then it was like, and I released that, and it made very little splash. It was like, okay, great. Where have you been? It took you this long to make 2 issues of a comic book. Shades of if you want something done on time, Nate Simpson might not be your guy. But like, yeah, so then yeah, that story sort of happens again and again in my career as I just my eyes are always just a little bit bigger than my stomach and I'm drawing non-player number 3 in the mornings still.
All right. That was my next question is are we going to get a number three?
I mean, what I'm trying to do is alter my approach to work to be
Hmm.
much more like a farmer, to tend a garden, not to expect plants to grow faster than they naturally go, but also not to stop watering the garden.
Yeah.
And so, continue to work on my comic, and when it comes, it comes. And I turned 50 this year. That means I still got a lot of years left.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, and yeah, I don't know if Uh, if games is a thing, I love working in games. Um, I doubt I'll ever work on anything as, consequential or important as Kerbal Space Program. And, of course, I wish with all my heart that that had been more successful. But hey, if, we planted some seeds in the minds of fans that are then one day manifested in some new product,
Yeah.
that would be great. I hope as many people are as excited about the idea of that, interplanetary delivery network, that that's a thing that can one day manifest. And I'll be there. I'll be the first guy in line to play it for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. I guess my last question is if you're able to, were there any unannounced features of Kerbal Space Program 2 that or anything that we didn't get to see that maybe you wish we had?
Well, I think I gave you a big one with
You did.
Lapartix.
You did. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I guess you
Unannounced. I
did
mean,
kind of answer that one. Yeah.
I'm not. I am still under NDA.
Sure. And I understand that, yeah,
And
there's
I'm
probably some
I.
stuff you can't talk
But
about.
also, I think we were pretty transparent in terms of like, you saw that we had like the milestone schedule sort of
Right.
laid out, and we were trying to hit those big milestones kind of in a predictable order. Um, I mean, yeah, what was there anything major on that game that was just not talked about? I definitely know that I had uh big aspirations for how it was going to end, right? We had this sort of like through line of like you're sort of finding these artifacts from an alien civilization. And and gosh, for some completely unknowable reason, I don't want to give a spoiler, even though this game's never going to exist.
Well, no
Because
pressure.
maybe it will. You never know.
Maybe it
What if I
will.
get the call from Annapurna? Is it
Maybe, yeah.
Annapurna?
Yeah, it's ex Annapurna developers. Yeah. Again, I'm not
I
sure what they're working on, but
I got
it
to keep
could
my
be.
powder dry, man.
Yeah.
No, keep the
Totally
dream
fair.
alive.
Totally fair.
I don't know, man.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk. And I mean, is there anything else that you want to talk about or?
No, not really. It's exciting to me that people still love Kerbal, and yeah, and it does seem like the spirit of modular space exploration continues to live in KSA.
Yeah. And you should check
Yeah.
out Kid Space Agency. It's coming up. It's still very early days, but yeah, it's
I mean,
looking very cool.
I'll let you pitch it to everybody through me. Like, how are they paying for it? Like, how does this work? Do they have a publisher, or like, what's their approach?
So as far as I know, it is currently being funded by Rocketworks and Dean Hall. And
Is that
I'm not,
like someone's savings?
as far as I know, and I
Wow.
that's a great question. As far as I know, I do think it's just coming out of their pockets right now. Whether or not they have other partnerships, I don't think they have been made public. I do know that he anticipates releasing the game for free. That is his hope, and that he can
Wow.
fund the project through a contributions model. So just people pay what they want. I know that
Sort of
he,
Star Citizen style.
yep, and I know that it's also been whether or not it's going to be on Steam. Currently, I think he said it is not going to be. I'm personally hoping
Hmm.
that changes, but we'll see what happens. Just because of the DRM aspects, and that he wants the game to be able to just be put on a flash drive, and then you can hand it to your friend, and they can put it on their computer in order to kind of inspire the next generation of people who may go into astrophysics or, you know, space exploration of one form or another.
It's a
Um,
it's a great approach. I mean, I could imagine considering the amount of passion there is in the community for this kind of game. Maybe that could be an engine for for keeping something like that afloat.
yeah.
Yeah, very. Do you know if he's contemplating something freemium adjacent? Like, is he thinking about people being able to buy special parts or something, or like, has he talked about the pricing model at all?
So that's I think something that's on everybody's mind is if the contributions model doesn't work, what is it just going to go to a, classic, $30, 40 for 50, whatever for the game, and then DLC models, or is it going to be microtransactions? And I don't think that the idea of it not working has been discussed, and what a contingency for funding the project would look like at that point. Um, but yeah, I know that they're building it on a from the ground up on a custom framework called Brutal that they've all kind of learned to use, and that is really open to modders as well. So one of the problems I see with maybe going to a selling skins or custom parts is everything
Yeah.
is moddable at that point. And if it can be modded and added in for free, that really reduces people's motivation to buy a skin or a microtransaction. So it's not a challenge I would want to take on. But
I mean, if there's a community that would be open to like funding something like this for, I don't know, egalitarian or humanitarian reasons, just, to make the world a better place, this is that community.
yes,
So yeah, especially considering how everything has continued to change and who knows what the future of sustainable independent game development even looks like.
right.
This sounds like it's got as good a chance as anything. I mean, as long as people are excited about it, then maybe this is the way forward.
Yeah, maybe. And I know a lot of people in the comments. I do monthly updates on the progress of the game through and what's posted on the Discord, and a big thing people are always like, just let me pay for it. Just let me pay for it. Uh, so I think they're like you said. I think if any game was going to do it, I think this is the right community. So
Yeah, well, here's hoping that they haven't made a plane that's too big for their runway. I
right,
mean, no
yeah,
no runway is endless. I could definitely attest to that. But hey, man, if Star Citizen can make it work as long as they have, then why not something we actually
yeah.
love? That'd
And
be great.
is that ever gonna come out full release?
Hasn't it kind of been out
Kind
forever?
of been out. Yeah, kind of been out. I was originally waiting when I first heard about, I think it was like 2010 when I
Yeah.
first heard about Star Citizen. And I was like, you know what, this one, I'm going to wait for the full release. And I was like, okay, I'm not even going to pay attention to it for a few years. And it's like 2015. And I'm like, whatever happened to that? I look into it. Then it's like 2020. Here we are 15 years later, still waiting on it.
Maybe maybe the full release was the friends we made along the way.
Exactly. Right. Absolutely. All right, man. Well, again, I don't want to take any more of your time, but thank you so much I had a ton of fun talking to you. Really
Nice.
interesting stuff. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it was great talking to you. Thank you.
Yeah, take care.